Welcome to Carp's Corner on the heels of this phenomenal NFL divisional round. It was absolutely tremendous. Anybody who sat here and watched, which I guarantee you when the numbers come out, it's going to be a lot of people, had to love what they saw. NFL, it is a multi-billion dollar business, tens of billions of dollars every single year pour into the coffers of the NFL. Why? Because the advertisers like it and they're willing to advertise and pay a lot of money. Well, why are they willing to do that? Because when you watch the games on Saturday and Sunday and you see the theater, the cinema, how compelling it is, that is why it is one of the few things now that isn't DVRable. And so if you can promise advertisers and your media partners that you can get people parked in their chair for 3 to 3.5 hours without really leaving, and they're going to be glued on it, that's worth a lot. It's worth its weight in gold. And when you have 3 games, all decided by a field goal, and the fourth decided by overtime, all good until the very last drop. That is compelling. People love it. I'm here for it. I sat in and watched all of them. And here's the best part. You can stream these things. We were watching them now, at their kids' games on Saturdays and Sundays. You're watching when you're driving around. Whatever you have going on, there's an avenue and ability for you to watch NFL football right now. And so as they continue to expand and Amazon gets more involved, a lot of these big tech companies, there's a reason why. Because as soon as these numbers come out, we'll probably talk about in the next episode what the overnight ratings were, for some of these games. Because my goodness, if Dallas and the 49ers, averaged about, 40 million, I think touched close to 50 million people last week. These games right here, they've all got to be in that 40 to 50 million person window. And here's the best thing the NFL has going, and this is what separates it from every other sport, is the fact that you have Cincinnati and Nashville, ultra compelling game. You got Joe Burrow. Everyone loves this guy. That's one of your games. People are tuning to watch. It goes down to a game-winning field goal. Absolutely fantastic. You have the Niners and you have the Packers. San Francisco, big traditional market in California, huge city. Yeah, we got that. It makes a lot of sense. Packers, Green Bay, they're a national brand, the smallest market in the NFL, but you have a superstar quarterback. That game's doing huge numbers. Rams, Bucks, LA, second biggest TV market in the country. Tampa Bay, small TV market, not a ton of history, but you have Stafford out in LA. You have all the glitz and glamour. They got Odell Beckham Jr. They've been to the NFC Championship, been to the Super Bowl. This will be the second NFC Championship in the last 5 years. You got Tom Brady now in Tampa Bay, defending Super Bowl champs, doing a huge number. I guarantee you that second half, man, people came swarming back in to their televisions to be able to watch it. I, for one, was one of them. You're like, it's just going to happen. And we'll get into all that in the game and break that all down. And then you get into the Chiefs and Bills. Kansas City, Buffalo, 2 small markets. Buffalo, second smallest market behind Green Bay. It's Western New York. Kansas City, Middle America, strong following there. Same with the Bills. And the Bills maybe have a little national appeal. But you have Josh Allen and Pat Mahomes. Pat Mahomes won an MVP. He's won a Super Bowl. Josh Allen is right there, right on the cusp. And he has been as hot as any quarterback in the NFL. And so that's doing a huge, huge number. Heck, it's overtime. 25 points in the last 2 minutes. People are captivated by this stuff. And so I thought it was important to open up with this and talk about it. Because as we sit here and all these other leagues and everyone else tries to figure out why football is what it is and why the NFL does what it does and, why they get all these numbers and why they make so much money, the proof is in the pudding. It's easy to see when you sit there and watch on a Saturday and Sunday afternoon. The divisional round may have given us the best 4 games in any stretch that you're going to have over any 2-day period in all of sport. Like, those were absolutely fantastic, and they had big names, and they were all different, high scoring, low scoring, elements, no elements, whatever. They had it all, had the intrigue, had the excitement, and it had the names. And this is what the NFL is doing better than anybody. And so they have all these unique quarterbacks, and we'll get into this in the next episode a lot. And I'm excited to talk about it, just the pathway of all these different quarterbacks and how they ultimately got here. And if this was foreseen, because we've got some of the great young quarterbacks, especially in the AFC right now. If you talk about Pat Mahomes, talk about Josh Allen, Talk about Joe Burrow. Talk about Justin Herbert. Throw Lamar Jackson in there. Curious to see where Deshaun Watson ends up and lands. But you think about those guys and what they're going to do and how they'll be able to change the face and the landscape of the NFL in years to come. I mean, it is a action-packed, dynamite, young crop of players. That's what people are here to see. Much to the chagrin of this defensive guy, people care about the quarterbacks, and that's a big deal. Let's start with that Tennessee-Cincinnati game. Tennessee, the 1 seed. Oh, and by the way, 3 of the favorites lost with home field advantage. Kansas City almost did. But Tennessee, the 1 seed, coming off a bye. They're getting Derrick Henry back. They ran him alive. Really wasn't on a count. They talked about him not being on a pitch count. Heck, I think he carried the ball for 20 times. Really wasn't all that effective. That Bengals defense rose up for the most part. And outside of the one long run by Donta Foreman, I mean, they were good. They were good. They did a really good job on the ground defending it, forcing it back onto Ryan Tannehill to make plays. And unfortunately, Ryan Tannehill, it's a good quarterback. He made some throws. He made some plays. He put his team, in close proximity, a chance to win some of those games, that game. But, he just came up a little short. I don't think that he has, that elite characteristic. He can lead you there and he can get you wins, but he needs to have his run game going. He needs to have his defense going. Defense was going. They sacked Joe Burrow 9 times, but it wasn't ultimately enough to overcome the 3 interceptions. And the last one, it's a batted ball. It's tough. I understand you're trying to squeeze it in there in the 2-minute situation. And then you get that boomerang that comes back. And when you give the ball to Joe Burrow, you know what he's going to do. But Joe Burrow, 28 of 37, 348. He throws the 1 pick. It's off Samaje Perine hands, gets tipped, ultimately gets intercepted. But, you're not really putting that on the quarterback. Like, no one's going to sit there and say that Joe Burrow didn't play a great game. He is part of this changing face of the NFL. The changing of the guard is the Tom Brady's, the Aaron Rodgers. These guys, Drew Brees has already left. As these guys start to age out, this is the new era. And this is one of the guys right here in Joe Burrow. He's got first playoff victory in Cincinnati Bengals history on the road. Think about that. I mean, this isn't, the oldest franchise in the world, but it's definitely not an expansion. It's not the Houston Texans. It's not the Panthers, the Jags. And this thing's been around for a while. And the fact this is the first road playoff game for a franchise that's been to 2 Super Bowls. Think about that. Pretty impressive stuff by Joe Burrow and what he was able to do. And the fact Jamar Chase, back-to-back 100-yard receiving games for a rookie. I believe I heard the stat that it's the first time in NFL history that's happened. I mean, he is a remarkable player. And I'll keep saying this because I think it's important to admit when you're wrong. I was a guy saying they should have drafted Penei Sewell. Bad move. Bad move, Bob. Now, they still can't protect Joe Burrow. He's got sacked 9 times. And they've got to protect him and find a way this offseason to bolster that offensive line. But right now, Joe Burrow's been hanging tough. He's been surviving. He's been finding his guy, Jamar Chase. They got T. Higgins the year before. They gave him the weapons, and now you're beginning to see this. And this is the new mantra in the NFL. Draft a young quarterback, make sure you got the right guy, and then give him weapons. Get weapons around him. They got Tyler Boyd. They got Joe Mixon. They have everything they basically need. Now, you just can't be getting your quarterback sacked 9 times because the only way to overcome your QB getting sacked 9 times is to force 3 interceptions on the other end. And that's what ultimately happened with Ryan Tannehill. So now the question is, where did the Titans go? They were the 1 seed. They had it all set up. Kansas City would have had to come to them. They don't get it done. They lose to Cincinnati in the divisional round. And Mike Vrabel's going to have to do some soul searching. Defensively, they're good. They're checking a lot of boxes. Heck, they held the Bengals to 19 points. 3 of them were a walk-off game-winning field goal by Chris Evans, who apparently he's got ice in his veins. Talking about before he goes out to kick it, like, can't wait to go to the AFC Championship next weekend. And the guy's got ice. But Mike Vrabel's going to have to do some soul searching. Is Ryan Tannehill the guy to take you to the next level? You brought in Julio Jones. You paired him with your offensive weapons. You had some elite ones right there already, and it just wasn't enough. And so you have to look like Ryan Tannehill's good. He's a nice player. I think he can get you to the Super Bowl. I think he can even win you one. But I don't know if it's going to always be because of him. If you dump it back onto him, I don't know if he's a guy that can truly carry one of these teams all the way to the promised land. I think he can get you close. And if everybody's playing well, then he can be someone who facilitates it all. I just don't think that he's ever going to be a guy that will truly be the ultimate difference maker for your team. And so the Bengals are moving on, going to take on Kansas City at Arrowhead Stadium. And Houday Nation is certainly fired up about this, because not only are they going, but they feel like you've got your guy, for the next 10 to 15 years in Joe Burrow and what he's been able to do. 49ers, Packers. My goodness, Green Bay takes the ball, marches all the way down the field. You feel like this thing's going to be over before it starts. Well, Niners defense, D'Amico Ryans, their defensive coordinator, makes some adjustments, settle in, and then do a good job for the rest of the game of really slowing down Aaron Rodgers, stopping that Packers run game. I thought this game was going to be different than it was in the past, especially when Aaron Rodgers faced the Niners a couple years ago. They got overwhelmed by their defensive line. And so I'm like, okay, Packers, David Bakhtiari's back. They're running the football really well. Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, they're being able to pound the football. Well, unfortunately, they only get 67 yards on the ground. A.J. Dillon cracks a rib. He basically out of the game in the second half. Doesn't really provide you much there. Aaron Jones did okay, but they kind of got away from the run game. Aaron Rodgers, everyone's trying to dump this on his lap and dump it at his feet. He's 20 of 29, 225-ish yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. He's sacked, I think, 4 or 5 times. Like, they got pressure on him, but it wasn't like it had been in the past. And so here's the thing. When you have an offense that's as high flying as the Packers and you're not scoring, you can't turn the football over. They didn't do that. They put themselves and their defense in a good position to be able to win the football game. It's a big deal. It's a big deal, because if you're not scoring, you cannot back your defense up, put them in a bad spot. And so there are going to be games, and this is one thing that people always have to understand, where you got to see it. 13 to 10. Hey, it's 13. If it's 13 to 3, and the Packers, if they make that field goal, they're probably winning this game and they're moving on. And if Aaron throws for 4 touchdowns next week, no one would remember this game. It's a slower offensive output. There's certain games where you just figure out, hey, this is the way we have to win the game. It's not going to be pretty. We're not going to throw over 400 yards, have 600 yards of total offense, score 42 points. Sometimes you just have to understand what the game is. And the Packers did. Aaron did. Don't take that many risks. Your defense is playing well. You're going against Jimmy Garoppolo on the other side. Heck, they threw it 19 times. The Niners threw it 19 times. Now, they're able to get it going on the ground, but yeah, they had really no passing game. Jimmy Garoppolo barely had double-digit completions. He had a huge one to Deebo Samuel on the final drive that helped set up the field goal. But it wasn't like he was out there lighting the world on fire. So you don't need to take unnecessary risk. The problem is Green Bay, the special teams blunders, and I know people have hammered it. I know they've been all over it, but you get a field goal blocked that would have put you up by 10. You get a punt blocked when they're not even rushing. The way it works in punt rush is you always have someone force the kick to make sure the punter just can't run it down. They run a fake and pull it down. He goes and gets 20 yards. It appeared that they were in a holdup. The San Francisco 49ers were in a return, not a block, but they just had their one guy forcing it, and he blocks the punt, a one-man rush. And then they don't even give their defense an opportunity. It's a scoop and score for a touchdown. Like, if you're Aaron Rodgers, you want to rip out your beard, rip out your hair, everything at that point. Because it's out of your mind how you could think that would happen. And so as we try to dump this, like I said, at the feet, in the lap of Aaron Rodgers, dude, you got a punt blocked for a touchdown in the fourth quarter, the end of the game. I mean, he basically had that thing wrapped up. He was playing more concerned. He wasn't going to throw an interception. You want to put his team in a bad spot. They had the lead. You kick it away. The chances of Jimmy Garoppolo driving the field and getting a touchdown there, very minimal. Very minimal. So ultimately, that's the way it breaks. They get the field goal, by the way, blocked field goal, blocked punt. When Green Bay goes out there to block San Fran's field goal, they only have 10 guys. So there's going to be special teams changes made. That can't happen. Ever. That cannot happen. It's bad ball. So they got that. So they ultimately lose. And we'll get into Aaron's comments after the game. But it's inexplicable how you could have such a big special teams meltdown. All right, Rams beat the Bucs in maybe what was the most dramatic game outside of the Bills Chiefs. Rams built a monster lead, and I'm sitting there feeling good. I'm not going to hide it. I'm a Matt Stafford apologist. I love him. He's my guy. He went out and proved on Sunday to the whole world what all of his teammates always knew, how good he was, what he was able to do. Because guys that played with him, guys who had played even against him, they had that type of respect for Matt Stafford. They knew what he was about. They knew that he's a guy that can throw from all the arm slots, that he's a guy that keeps his eyes down the field, that he's tough, that he's a winner, he can get through progressions. All of those things they knew about Matt Stafford. Now, finally, people in the media and the everyday fan who watches this can understand it. They can understand that Matt Stafford is that dude. And when the world was crumbling around him in the second half, he stood strong. The guy throws for over 350 yards, high completion percentage, couple of touchdowns, going against Tom Brady, for heaven's sake, who guy is dealing, straight dealing, throws for over 3 bills himself, touchdown and a pick. And they're down 27-3. And the Tampa Bay Bucs come roaring back. And it was almost reminiscent. During the telecast, you could hear Michaels and Collins were joking around about how Tom Brady was down 28-3 against the Falcons in the Super Bowl. And you thought, surely this would not happen again. There's no conceivable way that they could come back. Well, they did. Tom goes to work, slices them up, dices them up. Next thing you know, it's 27-10. And then all of a sudden, poof, another score. It's 27-20 or 27-17. It's like, oh my gosh, like the world is collapsing around them. And then all of a sudden, Matt Stafford and the Rams go 3-and-out, and they're struggling. They're struggling mightily. They're trying to figure out a solution. They go 3-and-out. They punt the ball away. And Von Miller comes up with the biggest play that he could have. The reason why you brought him in, if you were the Rams, gets a strip sack on Tom. It's like, all right, Stafford's getting the ball, good field position. You staved it off. You felt momentum swinging back, and they're in a good spot. They're in a really good position. And then, Matt Stafford's making checks. He's not checking for the ball. He didn't raise his leg, and you could hear him say, I didn't raise my leg. The center inexplicably snaps the ball over his head. Not only, and Matt Stafford goes after it, he makes a valiant effort, tries to cut off JPP, to hopefully one of his offensive linemen can get the ball, sacrifices his body. They lose 20 some odd yards, and they give up the football. Worst case scenario for the St. Louis Rams. What happens? Touchdown. Now all of a sudden you're in straight panic mode. And it's really hard in the game of football when it's like this in a lot of sports, to shift your mindset. When you're aggressive, you get a big lead. Then all of a sudden, you don't want to say you get passive, but you begin to draw back. You're like, hey, let's just nurse this thing to victory, nurse it to victory. Well, all of a sudden, you've got to turn it back up again. And you've got to find a way to understand, like, hey, I know that we're trying to nurse it. We got to put the gas down one more time. And it's really hard to make that jump in that conversion. And so then you see it right before the end of the game. Matt Stafford gets the ball back. Heck, almost gets sacked. It's moving forward. I don't know. Maybe he got across the line of scrimmage. Maybe not. Maybe it was a sack. Fumbles the football, recovers it. And you're thinking, man, just need this thing out and get it to overtime. And I love the fact that McVay had confidence in Matt Stafford. He had the confidence in him to say, let's go. Forget about that last play. 7 route. Cooper Kupp gets out of bounds. Awesome. And then when you're sitting there around midfield, and I respect Todd Bowles, the Tampa Bay defensive coordinator. He brings heat. He brings the nickel pressure to force the ball out of Stafford's hands. Thankfully, the Rams pick it up just enough. And you got Cooper Kupp on the safety, Antoine Winfield Jr., running down the middle of the field. And Stafford delivers an absolute dime to him, puts it right on his hands. And if you think about it, as they play the Niners next week, that's the type of throw that the Jimmy G didn't make against the Chiefs to Emmanuel Sanders. They're just a little bit long, just outside his reach. Stafford puts it right on Cooper Kupp. They get up there, spike the ball, field goal, 30-27, Rams win. And that's how Matt Stafford gets that elusive playoff victory. He had one last week, gets another one, and now he's playing in the NFC Championship game. And he's an easy guy to root for. His path, Detroit, everything, it almost broke him. Thankfully, he's able to keep it together and gets it done. And a huge victory right there for the Los Angeles Rams, getting back to the NFC Championship game. They're second in 5 years. Now, as we sit here and take a look, Chiefs, Bills, 42-36. And what was maybe the best NFL game that I can remember. And it had it all. It had the drama. It had defensive stops when you needed to. It had great quarterback play. There weren't any bad officiating calls, any bad penalties. There wasn't any bad ball. It was just really good. Defenses trying their best to stop these offenses, getting them to third down, getting them to fourth down. And heck, 3rd and 6, that's like Pat Mahomes. Hey, whatever, 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, hold my beer. I'm going to scramble for this. I'm going to throw it out and throw it to Kelsey, whatever it is. It was almost impossible to stop. Josh Allen threw 9 touchdowns in the last 2 playoff games and lost. Dude was remarkable. 27-37, 329 through the air. Mahomes, 33 of 44, 378, 3 touchdowns. Both the guys play a clean game, no interceptions. My goodness. And both of them use their legs. And this is what we're seeing now in the NFL. If you're going to be a statue quarterback, you better be great. Tom Brady's great. Matt Stafford, he'll scramble a little bit, but he's great. But most of these guys now coming up, we've changed the quarterback position to be more of an athletic position. So you get guys like Josh Allen. You get guys like Pat Mahomes, because running around and buying time is beneficial for you. And then being able to scramble and pick up yards. And so as good as it is to be able to play from the pocket, and that's still a prerequisite because you have to stand in there. And Josh Allen threw some strikes, man. Standing in the pocket, play action, drop back, delivering the ball right where it needed to be. Did it multiple occasions. But then he also did it with his legs. Him and Pat Mahomes, 68 and 69 yards respectively. Now, a lot of them, Mahomes came early drive, ultimately running down the field, picking up big scrambles, doing it what he needed to do. Huge deal right there. Josh Allen, they're running him, and they had some great calls. 3rd and 2, 3rd and shorts. I mean, they're running quarterback sweeps. He's faking the quick screen. He's doing all the stuff that he needs to do. They're by any means necessary. Big physical runner, and some of his conversions on 3rd and 4th down in the 4th quarter. My goodness, it was a thing of beauty. And he may have been the only guy that could make some of those plays. Jumping back, circling the defense, getting to the perimeter, using his speed. My gosh, it was great. And so they battle back and forth, 25 points in the last 2 minutes of the game. If you're a Bills fan, my heart goes out to you. I've been on losses similar to that. Maybe not quite as gut-wrenching, but I know how that feels, man. Fumbled snaps, penalties at the end of games, giving teams opportunity, just a little too much time, whatever it is. And you lose the game and it's the end of the season. You just go walking to the locker room thinking, how did we lose that game? How did this just happen? And the thing is, you got a whole year. Like, it's not, you just don't fast forward and get back to the divisional round and you're not in the last drive again. You have to go through the whole year. You have to keep guys healthy. You have to make sure you get wins. You got to get a little bit lucky. Your coaches, Brian Daboll and Leslie Frazier, your 2 coordinators, decent chance that one, if not maybe both of those guys are going taking head coaching jobs. So it's not just, hey, we'll run it back and be back last year. You see this and you watch it happen. Cleveland Browns were in a very similar spot last year against the Chiefs. Give up a big scramble to Chad Henne. Ultimately, they convert, keep moving on. And when you think like, yeah, we'll be back next year, you have no idea. Injuries can happen, attrition. There's all kinds of stuff that can rock your team. And so nothing is ultimately guaranteed. End of the game, though, Pat Mahomes or Josh Allen, after his great touchdown passes, Pat Mahomes has 13 seconds to answer. This thing was lost by the Bills. First of all, they should have squib kicked it. At least a second's going to run off at that point. Maybe the guy loses his mind, runs around a little bit, burns some time. And then they have 2 plays. They've got like the pseudo little screen to Tyreek Hill that picks up like 19, and then Travis Kelce in the seam. The Bills were playing too loose. You got to play that thing. I understand. Get 2 or 3 guys really deep. Don't let Tyreek Hill outrun your whole defense. Make sure that he is bracketed by 2 or 3 guys. But everyone else, play loose on your guy. Let him catch the ball, tackle him inbounds. They have 2 or 3 timeouts, so they can stop the clock. But you can't just give them all those yards. Give them 12. You can't give them 20. They were able to get down there in 13 seconds, 2 plays, pick up 40 some odd yards and hit a game-winning field goal. And that's bad ball. And the Kelsey thing, they've got him playing one-on-one, outside leverage with a safety. Like, here's the thing. They had a timeout. Getting in, staying in bounds or getting out of bounds didn't matter. Just play tight coverage. I'm bracketing Kelsey, and I'm playing high and low on Tyreek Hill. I am not letting those guys beat me. I'm going to force him to throw the check down to the running back. I'm going to tackle him for 8 yards, maybe 10, maybe 12. That's what I'm forced to do. And ultimately, they didn't do that. My goodness, it was bad ball. It was bad ball. That's why the Bills are going to be sick about losing this game. It also gets into the overtime rules. And here's what's amazing. I put a piece out on OutKick on Monday. For football being the most popular sport in America, the college and NFL game have 2 overtime rules that are wildly different, but yet is equally as bad. I understand during the regular season, if you want to try, the NFL, the rules how they are, that's fine. College football, I get it. But when you get these big time games, especially getting the playoffs, in college football, they'll see this eventually at some point in time. Forget line up at the 25 and then 2-point conversion. Then you're going for 2-point conversions after the third one play. That's like trying to decide, a basketball game by shooting free throws or 3-pointers. It's ridiculous. Same thing in the NFL. Like, we talk about all 3 phases of the game in the NFL mattering. And all of a sudden, Josh Allen never gets a chance to touch the football. And so the coin flip decided a little bit. And listen, I'm not knocking Kansas City, but they, in the playoffs, put 10 minutes on the clock, 12 minutes, and let them play that till conclusion. And if they're still tied, let them play another quarter and just keep on rolling that and figure it out. The NHL's got it figured out. In the regular season, they have 1 set of rules, 3-on-3, then they go to shootout. In the playoffs, 5-on-5. We're playing that thing until it's done, until somebody wins. And so do that in the NFL, at least for the playoffs, just so you get a chance to see it. It happened with Tom Brady against the Chiefs a couple of years ago. He did it to the Falcons in the Super Bowl in overtime. Like, you want to see the other team's offense and defense go out there and try to find a way to stop this thing. It's big and it's important. Aaron Rodgers comes out after the game, a lot of thinking, going to take some time, try to figure this out, talk to the people that are important to him. I get it. I completely understand. It's a long, arduous season. It emotionally wears you out. Went through a lot at the beginning of the year. He had the COVID situation, all the nonsense that he had to deal with that. And so I get it. He comes out and says he doesn't want to be part of a rebuild. I thought it from his comments earlier that it sounded like him and Brian Gutekunst had kind of mended fences. But when he says I don't want to be part of a rebuild, he's putting a lot of pressure now on the ownership. Get Devontae Adams re-signed, bring everybody back, figure out a way to do it. I don't care. They're like $30, $40 million over the cap. Find a way to get it done. Because if not, I'm out of here. And I get it. Aaron Rodgers, it's like Tom Brady did. They drained it. They went and got their final Super Bowl. And eventually it's like, hey, we couldn't keep everybody together anymore. We had to move on. That's what happens in the NFL. And so I could see Aaron looking around. There's a lot of movement that happens on the Packers. I don't want to be part of this. I want to try to make sure my last couple of years matter. I can play for something, play for a Super Bowl. And he's going to be balancing that between, chasing a Super Bowl somewhere else and then also protecting his legacy in Green Bay. Does he want to be like Brett Favre at the end of his career? Or does he want to play for one organization, the entire time? It's a rarity now in sports. It's a huge rarity. I remember Romo when he retired, that conversation, Dak took the job. It's like, do you want to go to a Houston? Do you want to go play somewhere else? Or do you just want to retire a Dallas Cowboy? I get it. I understand it. Depends on how bad you want to win and how much you think winning ultimately matters. And are you healthy? And is there a good spot for you? We'll see with Aaron Rodgers in the coming weeks and months what he ultimately does and keep you abreast at the information that is being leaked out and where it all ultimately leads. So I brought up the Cowboys. I had two more things real quick. Jerry Jones kind of non-committal on Mike McCarthy's future. His son, Steven, basically kind of said he was safe earlier in the last week. Jerry coming out saying you're going to evaluate everything. And this is something I find interesting. Dan Quinn, their defensive coordinator, who they respect a lot. He's a Giants fan. He's getting interviewed by them. Heck, he might be the front runner for that job. And if they offer him the job, I'm curious to see if Jerry moves off of Mike McCarthy and ultimately would fire him to bring Dan Quinn in and keep him on the staff as the head coach. Because that's something that you don't usually see. There's precedent for it, especially a team making the playoffs. You look back at the San Diego Chargers when they had Marty Schottenheimer as their head coach. Cam Cameron leaves, the offensive coordinator, goes to the Dolphins, which was there for a year, didn't end up well. But Wade Phillips leaves, ultimately takes a job with the Cowboys. They fired Marty Schottenheimer. It's like, hey, you had these great coordinators. Things were rolling. Things were humming. They're gone. Are you going to be able to take care of it now? Probably not. Probably not. And so ultimately, you understand it and you see what happened. And so I could see that happening with Jerry Jones saying, I don't want to risk losing Dan Quinn. I really like him. I really like him. I don't think Kellen Moore is ready to be the head coach, but Dallas likes to promote within. They like to keep things internal. And Mike basically proved over the last couple of years that he's a decent coach at managing stuff, but he can't manage games. And you're never going to get the most out of your team with Mike McCarthy. So let's keep an eye on that as this coaching carousel spins and moves around. And then lastly, Winter Olympics. NBC comes out and announces that they're not going to be sending their commentators there. They're going to be all calling it from a studio in the East Coast somewhere. I mean, that is wildly disappointing. First of all, China shouldn't have the Olympic Games based upon everything that's happened with the Uyghurs, everything that's happened with COVID and everything that's gone on. And so now we're going to send our athletes, but we're not going to send the media people because what, they're worried about fears of COVID, or on the other side, they're worried about getting detained and not being able to get out. If you say something wrong, or if you said something wrong in the past, that they're going to hold you against your will and detain you. But it's wildly disappointing that the Winter Olympics, because I'm a fan. I like the Olympics. I think they're fantastic. It's a great thing of a sense of national pride. You get to watch sports you wouldn't normally watch. You want to see Americans win gold, and we're not even sending anybody, I guess, to call most of these. Maybe they'll send a couple. I don't know. But at this point, I think NBC came out and said they'll be calling the Olympics from the United States. So, like I said, incredibly disappointing to see. China shouldn't even have them. They should have moved them months ago and tried to figure that out, where they could have put them in Salt Lake or find another city. There's places that they could have done it. But alas, they don't. And now we're left with this mess. That's all for this edition of According to Carp. We'll break down some of these great matchups coming up for the conference championship next episode. Stories of how these quarterbacks got to where they were and where they are right now, because every one of them in the conference championship has a different and unique path. And I think it'll be interesting to look at that and take a little peek. And then also we're going to sit here and, figure out what's going on with this coaching carousel and if there are any hires or who's the favorites for some of these jobs. So thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.